Well, joining me now to discuss this further and the political implications of it is Dan Hodges, commentator at The Mail on Sunday. Dan, thanks for your time this morning. This is the most extraordinary story that seems to get more extraordinary with every new revelation. Where are the Labour Party left this morning?
Well, the Labour Party are left in a mess, as evidenced by the fact that their leader has had to suddenly pull out of a major speech that was scheduled for this morning. And obviously, as we saw on the media round yesterday, the Labour Party has still got no coherent answer to the questions that have been thrown up by the release of the memo. The Labour Party still has no coherent answer to the fundamental question of how Keir Starmer's event differs from the events that they've been criticising, and obviously, most crucially, the event where Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak were fined merely for eating a piece of cake. And the other area where it's quite clear Labour are in a mess is nobody within the Labour Party is able to give a clear answer on whether they believe Keir Starmer should resign if fined, when Keir Starmer himself and many of his shadow cabinet colleagues called on Boris to resign simply because of the fact that Boris was being investigated. And obviously, as we now know, Keir is being investigated himself.
It does rather strike me that this whole conversation has reached this level of ridiculosity, really, because of Labour's initial response to Partygate. If Sir Keir had not been so puritanical on the issue of whether or not someone's subject to investigation, they must resign, or on the issue of asking or demanding that Rishi Sunak resign for his ludicrous fixed penalty notice, I think many people in Westminster can see that Rishi Sunak did not think he had done anything wrong, and that was an incredibly strict interpretation of the rules that landed him with a fixed penalty notice. I suppose Sir Keir Starmer might be in a better position now had he not called for Rishi Sunak to resign.
Well, yes, but I think the issue is there are three separate problems for Labour with this. The first one is obviously on the issue of whether Starmer has broken the criminal law. We'll have to wait for the police investigation. But certainly, and contrary to what some high-profile legal commentators were saying over the weekend, it is quite clear now that because Durham police have reopened the investigation, the police themselves very clearly see there is at a minimum a case to be answered here. Then we've obviously got the issue of what is basically the lying that the Labour Party have been doing on this issue, from when they were telling us Angela Rayner wasn't present at the event to when they finally admitted she was, to the fact, as we've seen in those clips, where Keir Starmer consistently has pretended the meal and the curry were some sort of impromptu that the meal was some sort of impromptu decision taken whilst they were working, whilst we now know it was pre-planned. And obviously on this crucial issue about where Keir Starmer has consistently said that they stopped working, had their meal, and then went back to work. Now, the memo is very clear. That wasn't in the schedule. I mean, obviously, I've spoken to an eyewitness. It's been reported in other newspapers, and eyewitnesses said categorically that they didn't go back to work. But then the final thing, as you pointed out, is obviously the hypocrisy. You know, we had a situation where Keir Starmer has consistently, not just on this issue but other issues, banged on again and again and again about Boris's need to be open, to be trustworthy, to be transparent, to demonstrate integrity, about the need for that across our politics. He's built it, if you like, into his leadership model. But we've got the situation this morning, an incredible situation where the Labour Party are still effectively trying to say that Boris Johnson and other politicians should adhere to the very high standards that Keir Starmer sets, but that Keir Starmer should not be held to the very high standards that Keir Starmer sets. And that's quite clearly a completely unsustainable political position.
The problem here, potentially, for the Conservative MPs that might sort of privately be delighting in this whole situation, is that people are less likely to believe that Sir Keir Starmer is someone who would want to go to a party in the first place. Simply the impression that we have of him as an individual in our sort of collective minds is that he's a fairly stern individual, whereas Boris Johnson is someone who likes fun more. So it's much easier on less evidence to think that Boris Johnson was probably partying, whereas Sir Keir Starmer, sort of almost the definition of a party, is something that Sir Keir Starmer is not at.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to be honest. I mean, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, we've obviously seen the videos. Whatever this event was, I'm not entirely sure I would characterise having a curry and a beer in those offices at 10 o'clock at night is particularly my idea of a wild party. I mean, I think throughout this is one of the problems. We've got fixated on this issue of, was event X a party, was event Y a party? That's not the issue. The issue is, was the event necessary for work purposes during the period of lockdown when people were supposed to be self-isolating? And it is increasingly clear on the evidence we have that this event was not necessary. Now again, the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, the Labour Party may have a defence. They may have a rationale for what happened, but it's quite clear the defence they've been setting out over the last weeks and months has basically been blown apart by the release of this memo and the witness statements to ourselves at the Mail on Sunday and other newspapers. So instead of hiding, as he's done today, Keir Starmer is going to have to come out, face the press, and finally be honest and upfront and clear up precisely what happened, as much as anything else, because he's got to appear in the House of Commons tomorrow because it's the Queen's speech.
Certainly some big questions to answer, and this does feel like the beginning of a rather large story rather than the end of it. Well, thank you for joining us this morning, Dan Hodges, and talking through that really important story there. Cheers.